Welcome back to the Stimulating Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Rich Bogle, and today I'm joined by a friend, colleague, entrepreneur, and respected medtech leader, Logan McKnight. Logan, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thanks, Rich. I'm so excited to be here.
So where are you joining us from today?
So I am just outside Seattle in Redmond, Washington. Actually, we have a 100-year-old cabin, and so hopefully it's a 90-degree day here in Seattle, and nobody has air conditioning. So hopefully our circuit breaker doesn't break with all our fans going and shut down our Wi-Fi. But
well,
yeah,
I'm happy that you're inside at least, and I'm so happy that you joined us today.
Yeah.
I am so excited to extend the conversation. I think you and I really around the same time, probably you before me, but really started publicly talking about leadership and the challenges that everybody faces, but really nobody talks about. And I just think it's so important because just before we came on and started recording this, we were talking about how there's a lot of people out there that, they experience this, they may feel alone. They don't really have any resources or anybody to talk to. And it's really important that we have this conversation and continue to talk about this publicly. So thank you so much for raising awareness and being a voice, a leader in this space, and particularly in healthcare where leadership is already abysmal. It really is.
Yeah, it's not just our field. I think neuromonitoring can be very isolated sometimes. It's interesting. So now as I'm, having to network a little bit more, which I feel like is kind of a dirty word sometimes, I'm realizing, I'm meeting all of these people from other companies and other health sectors and like med tech and med device. And a lot of them don't even know what neuromonitoring is unless they are actually in spine or actually seen this, which I've been doing this almost 20 years and that feels crazy to me. But I think it also speaks just how isolating. And everyone will be like, oh, I know neuromodulation. And I'm like, close, but not exactly. So we I think have been our own little island for so long that we kind of have to, like, in order to be sustainable in so many different areas, like just crack the shell. And so now I'm independent. Now I guess I can kind of go out there and say my, what I'd like to say, which I kind of like, that's the message on your podcast as well, as it's my podcast, so I get to say whatever I want.
Absolutely. Oh man, I'm a strong believer in that. Let me tell you, I learned a lot of lessons over the past few years, and one of them is just be you. Just
Yeah.
be you, really. So this is such an important topic, and I really want to get into in depth into some of the things that I think people really need to hear. Before we do that, though, I know that you have a leadership seminar coming up, and I don't want to butcher it. So I want just to give you an opportunity to talk about it a little bit in case people, they might tune out or, or whatever. But I want to make sure that we get an opportunity to talk about that, and then we'll jump into the other topics. So can you just take a few minutes to tell a little bit about this?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'm launching my first group coaching program. This is, the first time I'm doing this. I've been doing one-on-one coaching with leaders for a while, but I've had so many people kind of say they were reluctant to get one-on-one coaching. I think a lot of people think of it like as an executive perk versus maybe something they should have as a manager or a director. So my hope is that getting a cohort of leaders, starting with 10 for this first one. We're going to launch September 16th. It'll be a weekly workshop and lesson with me, and then twice a week group coaching with the group. And we're also going to have our own private Slack channel. Everything will be confidential in the group. And I am actually giving preference to whoever signs up to limiting it to that person within their company. So if they choose not to join without anyone else from their company, that's totally fine. So the idea is this group is going to help me build this. I really believe in it. I've been passionate. If anybody knows me, I've been talking about this, probably my entire career of I can't believe this isn't something that's offered. I can't believe that somebody's not offering help or coaching for leaders in our space because it is so challenging. So I really want to get it right. And then for me, that means building it with the people who are living it. So I'm launching it September 16th. I'll throw a link somewhere that people can click on. But my website is goodnightconsulting.net. And so I'm really looking forward to it. And I feel like it'll be a huge learning curve, both for me as a coach and then also really helpful and impactful for those who go through it with me.
I love
I'm
that. And I love that you and I share a passion for empowering other people. One follow-up question. You mentioned, and not trying to quote you directly, but you did say the word leader. And if somebody's a brand new manager, first time management, maybe they just got promoted, would this be something for them, or are you looking for people that have sort of been in leadership for a while, or both?
Honestly, both. I think if you're a manager and you're feeling like you're drowning or you're out of your depths, this is perfect for you, because I think so many people can attest to this who have been in leadership, is it just is really tough when you start. And I don't think till you get a little experience under your belt that you realize it's so natural to just think you're supposed to be crossing tasks off your list or doing way, way more than your team. And then you quickly realize, hopefully, or else you do burn out, like how unsustainable that is. And so the goal of this is to make it more sustainable and keep people, good people, honestly, in leadership longer. Because what I find is it's the really empathetic people who tend to burn out the quickest, and those that have like the best intentions of trying to support their team, but they end up just piling on themselves. So it's, it's for those people who are really mission driven. They care about their team, they care about the patients, but it's just getting all too much for them, and they don't see a sustainable way to continue on. So yeah, it's for a good mix of people, but I highly suggest anybody who's a new manager and struggling, if they don't want to join this first cohort, at least reach out, connect. I've talked to so many managers in my years who just feel like they can't catch a break, and I think like they should know that that's totally natural. It's really unfortunate, but at the same time, like they're not alone in that feeling.
Great. I love it. So, anybody who's listening, now's your opportunity. Hit pause and go to Goodnight Consulting. Is it .net?
It
Did you
is
say
.net. Yeah, I didn't grab
.net?
the .com, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's make a point of that .net, goodnightconsulting.net, and sign up. Be one of the first. So I want to jump to just, I think, branching off from one of my previous episodes on leadership, and for me, I think the title of it was Leading from the Deep End, Thriving as a First-Time Manager. And in that, I got maybe a little bit vulnerable, a little bit transparent. And one of the things that I shared was my first time as a manager, my second time as a manager. I had no clue what I was doing. I was really just sort of figuring out as I went along. And my observation has been every single person that I know that has been in management, no matter how much they fake it till they make it, when they start off, they don't know what they're doing.
Mm-mm.
And are you willing to share a little bit about your first time in management and some of the maybe what you look back on and say, definitely would have done this different, or something along those lines?
Absolutely. I mean, I listened to your podcast from a few weeks ago, and one of the things you talked about was like not letting the chaos seep down or up. I do have to say, so when I became a manager, I was like, I remember going into our CEO's office because I was in the middle of nowhere, Indiana at the time, working for Biotronic, and being like, I'm never going to get out of the OR. Because I literally never saw anybody. I was totally isolated. So I said I want to be a manager, and I was willing to move anywhere. And they were like, okay, great, Omaha, Nebraska. And I was like, except Omaha, Nebraska. Sorry, Omaha. I was in the Midwest. I want to get out of the Midwest. But they had an opportunity in Florida, and their leader just left. The team was kind of in shambles. And so I moved down there and kind of had to start rebuilding. And they didn't want to tell anyone I was the manager because they wanted to see if I'd sink or swim, which is real. I feel like a true like testament to the style of like leadership of like the penguin, just pushing them off the iceberg. But I had an amazing
Very
team.
1980s.
Yeah, it's just you sink or swim, and we'll let you know how you're doing, or you won't have a job. So, yeah, that first year, I was just like, I mean, first of all, covering cases, like my first real solid advanced cases, cortical mapping and things like that. So there was like a clinical challenge, and then there was also the people challenge. But I do have to say, like, my first team down there is, I still talk to all of them. I bonded with them so closely because I did, but for better or worse, I talked to them what was like going on with me and the challenges that we were having in our region. And a lot of times they came back to me with ideas or things I hadn't thought of. And I think I would have probably done a better job of strategically talking to them instead of just like word vomiting or like coming to them at a happy hour and being like, and I learned that very quickly because what ended up happening was then they would kind of do that to me. And then there was a lot of negativity, and that is not what you want. And I think it's a huge challenge in our industry because you can really focus on the negative. And one other thing you said in the other episode was if you guys haven't listened to it yet, I highly suggest you do. But the mindset shift. And I know that sounds like a little new agey woo woo, but I mean, honestly, I don't know if it's like the older I get, but like your mindset has everything to do with it. And if you frame things both in the way you talk in your own inner monologue and then also externally, is the way that you think, the way that you act, and just kind of like ultimately the person you become, which is, pretty amazing. So I think you almost have to like trick yourself into seeing the positive and being solution oriented. And then you're like everything follows it. And I think it was really hard for me as a first time manager to really just focus on the solutions versus like the woe is me, here's the chaos, here's all the problems, because my team was looking for a leader. They weren't looking for a friend. Even if I was maybe a little lonely and looking for friends, that was not what they needed. They needed someone who could rise above and help them and point in a direction that they needed to go.
So that's a really good point. And I think there's a lot of people, particularly in neurodiagnostics, probably true for other aspects of healthcare, that deal with this problem, which is that you're working on a team and you're a member of the team, sort of an equal member of the team, right? And then you get promoted and suddenly you're in charge of the people that you have been friends with potentially for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have to sort of redesign your relationship in some ways. In other words, sure, you're still friends, right? You're also technically their boss, you're their leader, and they will look to you for direction, sometimes not obviously. And so what thoughts do you have or what experiences do you have in navigating that transition from purely a friend and coworker to now a friend, coworker, and manager?
Yeah. I mean, I think not just for me, but my experience like managing other managers and then being the CEO of my company and seeing this happen a lot because our team out here in Seattle was a really tight knit team because we were a small group. And, anybody who got promoted kind of, especially the person, it was always interesting. It was like the person they were the closest with was the one that would always challenge them the most. And I think that's like, there's a positive and negative there. You can think of it as like an ego or I wish that was me. But I also think the person who's verbalizing something cares, and if they're challenging you, that's probably also a little bit they want you to succeed. And people can argue with me, not, but I always say like, take that person aside. I think to your point of what you said of like setting expectations is huge of like, this is how I want to lead. This is, what my expectations are of you guys, like, I need you to answer your phone when you're on call. I need you to, show up to the best of your ability. I need to let me know, like, if something's going on that I can help you with. But then also, like, this is a two-way street. So I want to know the expectations of me. But, I think the expectation of you can't just come to me with like every complaint, with every, I don't want to work on a Friday. I want to do this. And honestly, I think people ended up having to have sit down conversations with those people they were the closest with when they were peers on the team, when they became a leader, because those lines did get a little blurred, especially if you're hanging out after work. It gets a little blurry, it gets a little messy, but that's why it's so important just to set expectations and clarify. And to your point too about like being a genuine human and like being authentically you, like if you become this fake tight knit like boss manager when you get promoted, oh man, it's going to be rough for you because I'll tell you what, like there's people cannot stand hypocritical managers and they can also not stand fake managers. Like it's
100%.
It's brutal. So it's like, and you think like, especially I got promoted when I was only 25. Yeah, I was 25. And so, I mean, I feel like I'm still a kid really, but like I was a kid, and I sometimes thought I needed to put on this big facade in order to grow professionally. And that was an additional drain, like a big time. Okay, like after work, I was almost like, it was like steam was coming out of my ears because I was managing a team, doing the clinical stuff. And then anytime I was interacting with anybody who I thought was a higher up, I was just putting on this very tightly buttoned up facade of this, you know, I'm the best leader, I'm the best manager, I'm CEO material. And I actually, the more I let that drop, the more I saw success in my career.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe some of it has to do with feeling like, particularly as a new manager, that you have to prove yourself to the
Yeah.
people above you. And you do, but not in that way. You have to be an effective manager. So you can dress any way you want, you can talk any way you want, so to speak. You're not going to impress the people above you so much as being leading a successful team, essentially.
Yeah.
The metrics that are established for you. I also think that there are obviously challenges with stepping into a role of people that you're friends with. But one of the benefits is that I think one of the key unlocks for being a good manager is understanding what is important to the individuals on your team and what motivates them. And I once had a manager who I think really wasn't capable of thinking like that and thought that every problem would be solved by throwing money at people, not understanding that money is not the driver for everybody. I mean,
Mm-mm.
some people would love to have 5,000 extra dollars a year, and some people would like to have a couple extra hours a week to spend time with their kids and be able to have dinner with
100%.
them or send them off to school. And if you don't understand what motivates people, then you can't actually you just can't drive the behaviors that are necessary to have a successful team.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there's actually, I think, a book, and I want to say it's called "You Can't Motivate People," and that's so true. And I think new managers, what they do intrinsically is like, okay, I know what it takes to be a good manager. I know what I would want from my manager, so I'm going to go and I'm going to give all of that to my team. And then you go, and it spectacularly blows up in your face because they're not you. And that's the hard thing is you think I'm delivering all the things that I wish I would have had as a boss or as a manager. You don't in that spectrum, like it just doesn't matter. And so you have to know your team and what they want. And some of them are just gonna, like you to your point, like they just want to be, a basic spine tech and, have their weekends. And, they're just not interested in this like climbing the ladder career thing. And then you're going to have other people that just, maybe they want to go back to med school eventually, or maybe they want to go to business development. And I think the more you know about what they want and you can help them, achieve that within your team and your space, like there's always just more creative ways to do things. And I think managers realize, I think they need, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, although who's gonna get me in trouble? You don't have to ask for permission for everything. And I think that's the hardest thing for managers because when you're a tech, you're given this box, right? You need to stay in. Like, here are your protocols. You need to okay things with your neurologist. You need to talk to your surgeon. You need to sir, yes, sir. Here's the workflow. Here's the documentation flow. And then management. And then you get nothing. You get no box, you get no playbook, you get no protocol. And so you're almost beaten down to become a good tech, to follow these quality measures, which are necessary. But then when you become a leader of people, there is not a whole lot of that. You have to find your own way to it, it's almost like you have to rewire your brain chemistry a little bit, right? Like it's really, really tough.
It is, yeah. And what about the challenge that people face where I think this happens a lot in neurodiagnostics, where you get promoted and you're given a little bit of extra money and you're given a little bit of extra responsibility and you are otherwise expected to do the exact same work that you did before. You're just now doing extra work, which
Yeah.
might be minimal, like, oh, okay, I'm going to make you a manager and you're going to schedule people. And what that tells the manager is that they're not there as a resource for their team. They're not there to motivate and inspire them and drive best practices. They're there to plug people into a timeline of who's going to be where, when, and a lot of people, I think, get into that because they're like, oh, okay, so I can make my own schedule. Cool. So I can pick the best stuff. And wow, does that backfire? So you've got the challenge of being essentially told that you're going to do the same work and essentially be equal to the people that you're supposed to be managing, but then you're also this sort of part-time manager.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have seen so many people and teams and companies fail because of that model. And yet it's like,
It's still
I don't even
here.
know if it's the dominant model or if it is the model in certainly in neuromonitoring.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a disaster. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's hard. I think seeing more people getting promoted to like scheduler, and then there's like a regional or area manager who oversees, and then you kind of schedule your smaller teams. But to me, I don't know. I think that's like almost taking away the opportunity to learn to lead. I always when people would interview for like management positions, especially people around the team, I would always ask like, why do you want to be a manager? And if their answer was, I want to make more money, which may be like their genuine reason and their genuine driver, which I appreciate, my honest response to that is like, you are going to be miserable because the amount of money does not cover the additional work and the additional heartache and the headache that management really is. And so it's almost kind of like becoming a teacher. Like, how many teachers do you know who went into teaching because of the money? They're like, oh yeah, here's my sweet gig. Right. They had to
Zero.
really love kids and they had to be really mission driven. And I think the best managers are very people driven and mission driven because they yes, it's nice to get like the bump in pay and all that good stuff, but they're looking at it as this is a new challenge in my career. I want to lead a team. I'm really excited to prove myself and to test and then to help, like to make an impact. I'm a big believer that most people get into neural monitoring. I know I did when I found out that I didn't have to go to med school in order to make an impact in people's lives and be in surgery every day. Like I was like head over heels with the idea of neural. And then also that some days I didn't have to work till 5 o'clock. I was like, oh my God, is this a dream? Is this the best job ever? And anybody who's ever interviewed with me or talked to me about neural monitoring, because I used to talk to our classes when they would come through Biotronic and do a discussion about how to grow relationships and then also a little overview on billing. But I love neural monitoring so much. I loved my career. Just, I felt like I almost oversold it to people because I realized like then I would get people who signed up and I didn't exactly tell them, you don't have a schedule. You don't have a life in, like in the normal way that other 20-year-olds will have in this space. And so you do have to be very mission driven. And I think that's hard for people, especially if they're working for a company that they feel like they are just a pawn or a peon. Like keeping your internal values, like that's where burnout comes from too. Is like feeling like your values aren't aligned with your company, which
Oh
is
my
tough.
goodness, I'm so glad you said that. Because I was just thinking, so I want to put forward a thesis and I want you to respond to it. And I'll start with this. I usually differentiate between the aspects of motivation, inspiration, and aspiration. And for somebody who reports to you as a manager, it's important that they're motivated and that they aspire to do good work, right? But then as a manager, on the other side, you do motivate people, but really you inspire people. And
Hmm.
one of the key aspects, here's my thesis, right? I'm finally getting to it. One of the key aspects of inspiring people is really linking the work that needs to be done to values, particularly to the core values of the company. And most companies out there don't have core values. They might have a mission statement and a vision statement, but then after that, everything else that should be below that, like the strategy, the core values, the guiding principles, everything, how you position your company and what it is that you do, it's all missing. And if it's there, it's buried on a website. Nobody in the company knows what it is.
Right.
So the end of the thesis is that I think a lot of teams fail, a lot of managers fail to inspire because they really don't have any core values of the organization to link behaviors and tasks back to in order to inspire people.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
it seems like a fail point to me. So what are your thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, yeah, to your point, like I think so many neuromonitoring companies are like, we want to improve patient care, we want to improve neuromonitoring. It's like, okay, yeah, like we get it, right? That's the whole point of neuromonitoring, and the values or principles aren't there. So I think if a manager or leader is listening to this and they're like nodding their head and they don't know where the company's values are, like create them for yourself, broadcast them. Like what are the values that mean the most to you? And because you can build off of that for yourself, even if you don't feel like you're getting it from your company. And if you truly feel like at a certain point it's like really not aligning, you can go and you'll be able to find the company that does align with your values once you're able to verbalize them and to act and align with them. And I think like at the end of the day, if you're trying your best and you're aligning with your values, like that's a gold star. That's like the best you can do, right? Is just try to do that. But if you're aligning with somebody else's values or values that don't align with you and like you're just not sure, and like that's when you go to bed like just being like, did I suck today? Like I worked, 18 hours and I still feel like I let people down. But if you have your values and you know that you're acting in ways that align with that, like, be they yours, be they the companies, they're just kind of your North Star. Like, I really do feel like you every day feel a little bit more fulfilled. And I think that's huge.
I also think it's a really important interview question. So, assuming you're interviewing for a job, and I like to think about it as you're both interviewing each other. So, if I'm interviewing for a job, I'm interviewing that company to see if they're a good fit. Of course, I'm there because I want it, but that doesn't mean after I get my questions answered that I'm still going to want it. Ask them about their core values. If it's already on the website, then that's great. Don't ask the question, but you could ask the question, how can you give me some examples of how this particular core value is demonstrated in the company or something like that, to ensure that ultimately that the company's values align with yours, because the last thing you want is to be in a company that one has no values or two has values that don't align with yours, and that's just going to make you ultimately unhappy.
Yeah. I mean, and I love like asking the pointed question of like, if their values are like service, community, something else, and you're like, how do you embody community in your values? And they don't actually do any like philanthropy or, service work or anything, or like try to hire local people and train them and like take care of their local hospital. Like there's so many ways. And if there's nothing there, then that's almost more dangerous to me than a company that doesn't have their values laid out. Like if you have your company values on the wall but you're not living up to them, like that's a bright red flag, right? Like you've got to reassess, because a lot of that does trickle down from them.
Absolutely. And yeah, living those values is so important. There has to be alignment there. It really
Yeah.
does. And I actually give a pass to companies that haven't established values, particularly if they're a smaller company or fledgling company, and I think there's more important things to focus on when you're building a company. But if you're out there selling a service or a product and you're trying to attract talent, you're not going to attract talent without values. So
Yeah.
important.
And I think more and more in neuromonitoring, like the more people and younger generations that are coming in are like connected, online and things like that. I think if you're a company that just churns and burns through people, and I know turnover is a huge problem in our industry, but I think there's some companies that probably do that, more significantly than others. People are going to know about it, and it'll be so much harder to recruit talent. You're going to have to pay recruiters. You're going to have to only train people from the beginning. And all of that is like really, really expensive. So it's almost like you better fix the problem rather than trying to like, spackle over it with like, we'll just keep getting fresh blood all the time. I definitely felt like that at certain times during my career with Biotronic. The reality is like, I think almost like half the people I knew before I moved out to Seattle in the industry were like originated from Biotronic because it churned and burned people so fast. And
Mhm.
honestly, I got trained by Kent Rice and James Watt, like two of the best trainers, and I'm so grateful for my experiences. But the management and the leadership in the field, I think, was a huge challenge for a lot of people. It wasn't the clinical training, it was 100% leadership and how that was being embodied and what other people were doing. I know that was like, I swung the other way so hard when I first started trying to be like a really empathetic and cool manager. And then I ended up being like, okay, I'm going to burn myself out. Now I have to kind of course correct to not go to the other side and not be, like negative about my team and still do what I need to do and align with my values. But it takes a little bit to kind of find your balance there as a leader.
I wanted to ask you this question. I'm trying to think of how to ask it, but maybe I'll just keep it simple, which is that, you know, I started off by asking you about your first kind of management experience and maybe a challenge that you had. But is there something that you can point to in your career that was kind of a light bulb moment that sort of changed your perspective and allowed you to focus in on or learn more about what really makes for a good manager?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like I said, my first team, I remember meeting one of my team members in the parking lot to like get some supplies and I was like afraid wire. I was just like frazzled. And I think I remember just starting to cry. And this poor guy, his just face was just like, he was not ready for that. And I was just like, how am I doing? Does everyone hate me? Am I failing? And I remember he just looked so confused and he was like, no, like, but also like, why would you ever think that? Like, you're like, it's fine. This is a hard job. We're doing our best. You're doing your best. Like, if anything, like you're just doing too much. And I was like, well, I don't want to be one of those managers who like doesn't, and he's like, dude, you aren't, because that's not who you are. But you need to pull back that you can actually like not be crying to me in the parking lot because I haven't slept because I was covering so many cases and so worried about constant add-ons in my team. It's like, you need to like take care of you so you can lead us. Holy light bulb. I just can't, I mean, like that was like life changing. Like, I think I went home and I think I honestly still think about that moment every year. And I still talk to that guy. His name is Carlos Ramos. If anybody knows Carlos, shout out to Carlos
Name
for
sounds
just being a
familiar.
rock.
Well, hey, Carlos.
Yeah,
Hope
I
you're
know.
listening.
He was awesome. He definitely like stuck it out with me. And actually, I'm super proud of him. He started a company in Florida and ended up selling to Accurate. So, I think this industry is just like, it's a very small world, full of really good people. If you can find those people and like align, like I said, but you got to know what you stand for and your values so you can find your right people.
It's interesting in talking to you. I was just reminded that within the last couple of days, the Asset TED Talk that I gave that was really the impetus for doing the podcast on the same topic, leading from the
Yeah.
deep end. I got all of this feedback from the audience, and it was really, I mean, speaking of crying, almost got there. I'm a crier. I'm not afraid to admit it. Give me a sad movie, and that's it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, one of the comments that I got was that it was very helpful, but it was high level. And it would have been nice to have more detail on all the topics. And like, well,
Mm,
I get it, but it's a TED Talk. It's, supposed to be 20 minutes. But it's making me think that I should really carve out some of these topics and dive in more to provide more information because it's nice to have a quick summary talk, but the deeper dive, I think, is really what some people are, particularly in the maybe newer people to management, are really looking for is some specifics. So
yeah.
maybe I'll do that in the future.
It's hard. I mean, I think that's, honestly why I wanted to start coaching, because I realized like you needed to dive into it with people, and not to shamelessly plug again, but the course that I'm working and, developing, the areas that I want to focus on are like just your self-awareness first and foremost, and how you communicate to your team and delegate, and then all the things that come with like the future, like your vision, your strategy, how do you set boundaries and your sustainability, like how do you scale your impact for the long term in your career, and then at like the end of the 8 weeks, I want to wrap it up with like how do you coach other leaders, how do you build other leaders, and because it is so hard to know if you're doing the right thing, I know you and I have talked about this before, but this feeling or this field can be so isolating, just in so many ways. Like as a manager, you're out there leading your team. You don't see them every day for the most part, and then you definitely don't see the other managers every day or your boss every day or probably even talk to them. And it can feel really lonely, especially if you don't have somebody that you really mentor or that's mentoring you or looking up to you. And a lot of other leaders or like directors or other managers are kind of just trying to stay afloat themselves. So they don't have the capacity to lead and to do that. And it's almost like this cycle of burnout. And so how do you kind of like stop the cycle of burnout? And I think it's just like you create groups of leaders who know how to earn and have the capacity for themselves to help then other leaders. And like, it's that's the goal with this, is that if I help more leaders, they'll be able to help other leaders in the future, and maybe we'll start to see a shift. And I'm not going to be like, say that I'm the, person who's going to fix all the problems or anything. But I do think conversations like this are so important. Like I just don't think I ever heard them when honestly, I don't even think I heard them until I started talking about it. And then I felt like I started hearing people talk about it more. And I was like, yes, like this is what we need. We need a conversation. I love that you had it at Asset as a TED Talk, because I think as much, to be honest, like if someone came to me and they're like, I want to talk to you about this new paper talking about like this waveform and this way, I'm not that person. There are other people who are going to talk to you about the science and break it down for you. But like the people aspect, the leadership aspect, the career development aspect, that is what I'm here for. That is my passion and what I think also a lot of people were looking for and need more of. So I think these conversations are going to be happening more frequently, which I'm excited about.
I think so too. One of the things that I mentioned in that talk was, and this is a problem all throughout healthcare, but a lack of succession planning. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that you see, I don't want to pick on boomers, but it's an opportunity, so I will. You see a lot of boomers who get into these upper level leadership positions, and they plan to work till they die to the expense of the people below them and their company. And if you ask them about succession planning, they say, well, there's managers below me and managers below them. That is not succession planning. It is ignorance broadcasted.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, like when I started the process of stepping down from my CEO position, I gave a 6-month notice 3 times over because succession planning was so hard. It was so hard for me to do within my company because I think like it was ignored. I was like, hey, I'm really wanting to step away. I really want to do this. So even like for me personally, I was advocating. I was like, I want to leave. Here's what's happening. There was like a certain amount of like let's ostrich ourselves. Let's stick our head in the sand and just ignore like the future. There's no way, like, and I think that probably speaks to maybe even a bigger, like, systemic problem with neural monitoring, that a lot of times people are like, oh, God, this is such a problem, but like, what are you going to do? It's like somebody should do something, though, right? Like, just so we're clear, we do realize it's a problem, but like, I can't remember the exact quote, but it's like evil wins when good men do nothing. And I know that's a dramatic, like, I'm not, comparing that to succession planning might be a big leap, but I think that those little things do start to add up. Like at the end of the day, if you know that what the right thing to do is, but you're like, I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll focus on it later. I'll focus when I'm not so busy or it's not so chaotic. Like, sorry, but that day is not coming. If you
Nope.
don't prioritize it, it's not happening. So it's, in so many spaces, like you just have to carve out the time and the energy to prioritize the things that are going to make the impact, like succession planning and leadership development, and honestly, just listening to your team about what's going on and how you can solve problems and like putting your head together. Like that takes time, that takes energy, but it is worth it if you are willing to actually do something about it and create solutions based on it.
Yeah, it just reminded me too that, I think, so I don't know what companies do. I only know what the companies that I've been with do, right? And so my experience has been that with companies that have like company retreats or company meetings or such, right? There's teamwork exercises. I call them trust balls, but they could be a number of things, right? Sometimes they are trust balls, and sometimes they're just a night out at the bar with the team and photo op for LinkedIn, which is fucking horseshit and everybody knows it, right? It is. But what's real is the need to have people get together and share their challenges and,
Hmm.
bring junior managers, mid-level managers, bring everybody together who's in a leadership position and solve problems and then go out to the bar. Like,
Once you've
because
done something.
yeah, you can do both, but I have not seen a lot of that. And even I'll go back to one experience where it was kind of combined, to be
Hmm.
fair. There was the trust falls and then there was the workshops. But the workshops were like everybody took the Myers-Briggs test, which is another fucking joke. I did a podcast on that. It was developed as a game just like Monopoly, and
Yeah.
somebody who was really good at sales took it and sold it to large corporations based out of Philadelphia, my hometown, at least,
Capital of capitalism.
yeah, the Phillies are real, the Eagles are real, but the Myers-Briggs is not. And so we did that, but we didn't actually solve any problems. We didn't
Yeah.
focus on like, what are your challenges? And so what did we do? We all went back and dove into the same problems that we had before, but now we knew our MBTI personality score.
Yeah. No, I mean, God, that's such like a big point. And I think that's also the challenge of, like you said, like being able to dive into it more in a TED Talk. Like a weekend seminar is great, maybe, a convert like this is great. It's just not going to have the impact and the longevity that like actually digging in with somebody and like solving the problems and listening and it being a two-way conversation. I mean, you and I aren't in the field and covering cases anymore. We're just not. And so the reality is like problems only get solved if we engage with the people who are. And that's why I say it takes time, it takes energy, and it's not gonna happen overnight either. Like it's like, that's the biggest thing in my career I've realized is like success does not like look like this, right? It looks like like that. And man, sometimes you regress and you're like, crushing it, and then you're just like, this is great. I see the improvement, and then you do something or something happens that makes you backslide. And it's like
Mhm.
that's the way it goes. Like those are lessons you're supposed to learn, and you take it and you package it however you need to learn the lesson, and you move on, and you climb the hill. You just got to keep going. But you're right, like I did one when I remember it was the first leadership training I did. I was so excited about it, and same thing, I think we got like our disc, right, like our high DI. Nobody did it. Like yes, it was cool to see like who and but no, nobody was surprised, right? Nobody was surprised that these people were like the outgoing people, that these were the direct people, that these were the analytical people. Like we could have done that on our own. Yes, it makes you more aware of yourself or maybe self-aware of others, but like if you don't capitalize on that momentum, it doesn't go anywhere.
Logan, this is a wonderful conversation. I love everything that we're talking about right now. And I really think that the audience would benefit from breaking this into two different episodes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this for now, and then we'll come back next week and we'll continue the conversation. You and I are going to be dressed the same because we're recording it all at the same time. But we'll wrap it up for today. So thank you so much for being here, and thanks to the listeners. You can submit your questions and comments to the Rich Vogel subreddit or by email to stimulatingstuffpodcast@gmail.com. I always love hearing from you. I'm Rich Vogel, and that was Stimulating Stuff.